I'm James Caldwell, 34 now, but I was a 25-year-old staff sergeant with the 10th Mountain Division, 287 Infantry when it happened. Just a kid from Boise who thought he'd seen it all during my first deployment. I had led dozens of patrols through Wardak Province during his second tour in Afghanistan, but on April 17, 2012, when the bustling village market suddenly emptied and even the birds stopped singing, I knew something was terribly wrong. What happened next earned me the Bronze Star, with valor and haunt my dreams for years to come. Subscribe now for more first-hand accounts from those who served, and ask yourself, what do you do when the silence feels louder than gunfire? I grew up in Boise, Idaho, in a neighborhood where you could ride your bike until dark without your parents worrying. My dad was a high school history teacher who never served but admired those who did. He kept books about World War II and Vietnam on our shelves. I'd flip through them, studying the faces of young men not much older than me. When 9/11s happened, I was a sophomore in high school. I remember sitting in Mr. Grayson's algebra class, watching the second tower fall on a wheeled-in television. Something shifted in me that day, a certainty that I wouldn't be going to college right away like my parents hoped. You can serve your country in other ways, my mother said when I told them I wanted to enlist. She meant well. She'd seen what Vietnam did to her brother. He came back different, quieter. He'd jump at sounds no one else heard. I need to do this, I told her. I need to be part of something bigger. My father was silent at first, then nodded slowly. If you're sure, James, we'll support you. I enlisted a week after graduation. Basic training at Fort Benning stripped away the naive kid from Idaho and rebuilt me into something harder, more disciplined. I excelled at marksmanship and land navigation. My drill sergeants noticed. By the time I finished advanced infantry training, I knew I'd found my place. When my first deployment orders came for Afghanistan in 2010, I felt ready, eager, even. My unit's 2nd Battalion, 87th Infantry Regiment, 10th Mountain Division, had a proud history. Light infantry meant we were agile, could fight in terrain others couldn't. The mountains of Afghanistan were our element. I called my parents the night before we shipped out. You remember what Uncle Dave said about always keeping your head on a swivel? My mother asked. I remember, Mom. Good boy. I didn't tell her that where we were going, keeping your head on a swivel might not be enough. Aides didn't care how vigilant you were. Neither did snipers. I'm proud of you, son, my father said when it was his turn. Come back to us. I will, I promised, not knowing how hard that promise would be to keep, not physically, but mentally. I didn't understand then that the part of me boarding that plane wouldn't be the same part coming home. I was 23 years old, I thought. I understood war from my father's books and the stories my uncle rarely told. I had no idea. My first tour began at Bagram Airfield, sprawling fortress of concrete barriers, plywood buildings, and dust. Always dust. It coated your skin, your weapon, your food. You tasted Afghanistan with every breath. We were sent to a remote combat outpost in Kunar Province. The mountains there rise like jagged teeth, creating perfect cover for Taliban fighters moving between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Our mission was to disrupt their movement and protect nearby villages that were cooperating with coalition forces. The first month was uneventful patrols, meetings with local elders, handing out supplies to children. I started thinking maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Then came June 12th. We were returning from a routine patrol when the first RPG hit the lead vehicle. The explosion lifted the front end off the ground before slamming it back down. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions. Contact right, contact right. Someone screamed over the radio. I'd trained for this moment hundreds of times, but nothing prepares you for the reality, the deafening noise, the smell of burning metal, the way your heart hammers against your ribs like it's trying to escape. My team took cover behind our vehicle. I remember checking my weapon, a mechanical action drilled into muscle memory. I spotted muzzle flashes from a ridgeline about 300 meters away and returned fire, calling positions to my squad. Caldwell, get your team to that drainage ditch and flank left. My platoon sergeant ordered. We moved, staying low, using the terrain. For cover, I was conscious of every step, every exposed inch. We reached the ditch and began working our way toward the enemy position. That's when I heard, "It is strange." Wet cough to my right. Specialist Allen, one of my newest team members, had taken a round through his shoulder. Blood bubbled from his lips. "Man down," I called, crawling to him. His eyes were wide, more surprised than afraid. "Sarge, I can't feel my arm," he said. I applied a pressure dressing while calling for the medic. "You're good, Allen. Just a scratch." "Doc's coming." Our medic, Peterson, reached us moments later. "I got him. Caldwell, go." I hesitated, then continued moving my remaining team forward. We managed to suppress the enemy position enough for air support to arrive. The firefight lasted 43 minutes. It felt like hours. Allen survived, but was sent home. 2 others in our platoon weren't so lucky. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Allen's face, the blood on his lips. I kept wondering if I'd made the right call, if I could have prevented him from being hit. Lieutenant Hayes found me sitting outside our barracks at dawn. "First firefight's always the hardest," he said, offering me a cigarette, though I didn't smoke. "Does it get easier?" I asked. "Not easier. You just get better at functioning through it." He lit his own cigarette. "You did good today, Caldwell." "Your team responded well." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "The doubt you're feeling right now? That's normal. Use it. Let it make you more careful, more precise. Just don't let it paralyze you." Over the next 10 months, we faced dozens of similar engagements. Some worse, some mere harassment fire. I was promoted to Staff Sergeant after our platoon sergeant was wounded and evacuated. Suddenly, I had more responsibility, more lives depending on my decisions. By the time my first tour ended, I'd lost that initial, wide-eyed nervousness. I'd learned to function in chaos, to make decisions under fire, to lead men who were scared. But counting on me not to show my own fear, I thought I'd learned all Afghanistan had to teach me. I was wrong. My second deployment came faster than expected. 18 months after returning home, I was back in Afghanistan. Different province, same war. This time, I had my own squad 12 men who looked to me for guidance, for decisions that would keep them alive. Murphy was my radio man, 22 years old from South Boston, with a thick accent that got thicker when he was excited. He'd been a communications specialist since enlisting and could fix a radio with duct tape and a paperclip if needed. He carried pictures of his girlfriend Sarah and his helmet high school sweethearts who'd written each other every day during his first tour. "She's gonna be my wife when I get back, Sarge," he'd tell anyone who'd listen. Already got the ring picked out. Rodriguez was my team leader, steady, methodical, with 3 years of experience and a quiet confidence that steadied the newer guys. He came from El Paso, joined up after his father died to help support his mother and sisters. Never complained, never lost his cool. The kind of soldier you want beside you when things go bad. My abuela says I have a guardian angel. He told me once during a night patrol. Says that's why I never get hit. He tapped a small medallion of St. Michael he kept pinned inside his body armor. Davis was our medic, not technically part of my squad, but assigned to us for most missions. Former college football player who could carry a wounded man over his shoulder like it was nothing, had hands that never shook, even under fire. "I joined to pay for med school," he'd say. "Figured I'd get some real-world experience first." Then there was Wilson, the youngest at 19. Grew up hunting in rural Tennessee, could put 3 rounds through the same hole at 300 meters. Talked about his truck back home like it was a person. Called it Eleanor after some movie car. "When I get back, me and Eleanor are driving coast to coast," he'd say during long watches. No schedule, no plan, just driving. Ortiz was our jokester, always with a smart comment or a story about his wild weekends before deployment. From Chicago's South Side, joined to escape gang life that had already claimed 2 of his cousins. "This is safer than home, Sarge," he'd say, even as tracer rounds lit up the night sky above our outpost. Chen was the quiet one, engineering student who enlisted after his scholarship fell through. could disassemble and reassemble any weapon in the dark. Sent most of his pay home, to his parents in California. They think I'm crazy for being here, he admitted once. Maybe I am. The others, Thomas, Jackson, Miller, Patel, and Gonzalez, each had their stories, their reasons for being there. Some for college money, some for family tradition, some just looking for purpose. Together, we became something more than 12 individual soldiers. We became a unit, a machine with interworking parts. We trained together, ate together, patrolled together, learned each other's quirks and tells. I knew Rodriguez rubbed his medallion before every patrol, knew Murphy double-checked his radio frequencies when he was nervous, knew Wilson cleaned his rifle when he couldn't sleep, which was often. They learned mine too, how I'd go quiet before making a tough call, how I always checked my map twice, how I wrote in a small notebook each night, but never told anyone what I wrote. What's in the book, Sarge? Ortiz asked once. Names, I said, just names. They didn't ask again. By April 2012, we'd been in Wardak province for 5 months. We'd had our share of close calls, a few firefights, one IED that detonated after we'd passed. Nothing we couldn't handle. We were good at our jobs, confident in our abilities and each other. That confidence almost got us killed. Wardak province sits southwest of Kabul, a strategic choke point for anyone wanting to control the capital. The terrain varies wildly from valleys with apple orchards and wheat fields giving way to harsh mountain ridges. Villages dot the landscape, some friendly to coalition forces, others hotbeds of insurgent activity. Our forward operating base FOB Airborne was a collection of concrete barriers, guard towers, and prefabricated buildings surrounded by concertina wire. Nothing pretty, but it was home. We've been operating out of there since November 2011, running patrols along Highway 1, the main route connecting Kabul to Kandahar. The Taliban wanted control of that highway. We were there to deny them. This whole province is a pressure cooker, Captain Reynolds explained during our first briefing. Lots of Taliban movement, lots of tribal politics, lots of competing interests. He gestured to the map. These valleys have been invasion routes for centuries. Alexander the Great came through here. So did the Soviets. Now it's our turn. Reynolds was a good officer West Point graduate who didn't let it go to his head. He trusted his NCOs and listened when we spoke. The key terrain is this stretch of highway, he continued. They control that. They strangle Kabul. We've lost 3 vehicles to IEDs in the past month, all along this 10-kilometer stretch. That 10-kilometer stretch would become our primary area of operations. Our mission was to disrupt Taliban movement, gather intelligence, and maintain a visible presence to reassure local villagers cooperating with the government. The first IED hit Alpha Company in early March. Their lead vehicle triggered a pressure plate hidden under fresh asphalt. 2 soldiers wounded, none killed, but it was a close call. The second came 2 weeks later. Command detonated explosive buried in a culvert. The blast flipped a mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle, MRAP, onto its side. The armor held, but the gunner suffered a broken arm and concussion. The third was the worst, a deeply buried IED with enough explosives to tear through the undercarriage of a Humvee. We lost Sergeant First Class Williams and Specialist Torres. 3 others were medivist with severe injuries. Each incident changed how we operated. We varied our routes, our timing, our tactics. We brought in route clearance packages, specialized units with ground-penetrating radar and mine detection equipment. We increased our surveillance, both aerial and human intelligence, but Wardak was Taliban country. They had spotters in every village, informants, watching our movements, relaying our patterns back to their bomb makers and fighters. It's like they know what we're going to do before we do it, Rodriguez said one night as we cleaned our weapon. They've been fighting in these mountains their whole lives, I replied. Their fathers fought the Soviets here. Their grandfathers fought before that. This is their home. Feels like we're always reacting, never getting ahead of them, Murphy added. He wasn't wrong. Despite our technology, our training, our air support, we were playing their game. They'd plant an IED, we'd respond. They'd ambush a patrol, We'd chase shadows into the mountains. The locals could sense it too. Fewer villagers were sharing information. Markets would empty when our patrols approached. The friendly waves from children became less frequent. By April, tension hung over the province like the dust that never seemed to settle. We could feel something building, more chatter on intercepted communications, more reports of fighters moving through the area, more suspicious activity along our patrol routes. Something's coming, Captain Reynolds told us during an intelligence briefing on April 16th. We're seeing increased movement across the Pakistani border. Weapons, fighters, supplies, spring offensive. I asked. The Taliban often ramped up operations as winter faded, possibly, or something more targeted. He pointed to the map, specifically to a village called Sadabad, along our patrol route. We're getting reports of new faces in this area, people the locals don't recognize. Foreign fighters, Rodriguez asked. Maybe. Intelligence is spotty. Reynolds looked at each of us. Until we know more, I want extra vigilance on all patrols. No standard patterns, no predictable timing. And I want you pushing your men to watch for anything unusual, no matter how small. We left that briefing with a sense of unease. Veterans like Rodriguez and me had felt this before the calm, before the storm. We didn't know the storm would break the very next day. April 17th began, like most days in Afghanistan. Eerily, I was up at 0430, giving myself time to check equipment, reviewed the day's mission, and gather my thoughts before waking my squad at 0500. The morning was cool. That brief window before the sun turned the day into an oven. I sat outside our barracks, sipping instant coffee that tasted like dirt but delivered the caffeine I needed. My notebook lay open on my knee as I added a few lines, nothing profound. Just observations from the previous day and thoughts about the coming patrol. Murphy emerged first, eyes still heavy with sleep. "Morning, Sarge," he mumbled, dropping beside me with his own coffee. "Sleep okay?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Murphy had been having nightmares, not unusual for soldiers on their second or third deployment. "Same old," he shrugged. "Sarah says I should talk to someone when I get back." "Smart woman," I said. "You should listen to her." The rest of the squad filtered out gradually, some alert, others still shaking off sleep. By 0530, we were assembled in the Tactical Operations Center for the morning briefing. Captain Reynolds stood before a map of our area of operations, markers indicating known Taliban positions, recent incidents, and friendly forces. "Good morning, gentlemen. Today's patrol will cover Route Irish through Saidabad and the surrounding agricultural areas." He traced the route with his finger. "Intelligence indicates possible Taliban movement in these eastern valleys. 3rd Platoon reported seeing individuals moving equipment at night here and here." He pointed to 2 locations, marked with red X's. "What kind of equipment?" Rodriguez asked. "Unclear. Could be weapons, could be supplies. We need eyes on it." Reynolds looked at me. "Staff Sergeant Caldwell, your squad will take point on this one. Standard presence patrol with the addition of these observation points." He indicated 3 elevated positions overlooking the valleys in question. I nodded, already mentally adjusting our approach. "We'll need to modify our route then. If we go straight through the village, they'll have time to hide whatever they're moving." "Agreed. Suggest you approach from the south. Use this ridge for cover." Reynolds indicated an alternative route. "Rules of engagement remain the same." Lieutenant Barnes added, "Do not fire unless fired upon. We're trying to gather intelligence, not start a firefight." Barnes was our platoon leader, younger than me, but solid. He trusted his NCOs and didn't micromanage. "If you do make contact," Reynolds continued, "call it in immediately. We'll have a quick reaction force on standby and air support within 15 minutes. The rest of the briefing covered communications, protocols, rally points, and the latest intelligence on nearby villages. Standard stuff, but essential. As we were leaving, Reynolds pulled me aside. "Caldwell, keep your eyes open today. Something doesn't feel right, sir. Just a feeling. Intercepts have been quiet to quiet, like they're being careful about what they say on comes." I nodded. We'll be extra vigilant. I know you will. He clapped me on the shoulder. You've got a good squad. Trust your instincts out there. Back at our barracks, I gathered my team for our own briefing, laying out the mission and each man's responsibilities. Murphy, I want comms checks every 15 minutes instead of 30. Roger that, Sarge. Rodriguez, your team will provide overwatch when we reach observation point Alpha. Chen, you're on point until we hit the village. Then Wilson takes over. Each man acknowledged their role. We'd done similar patrols dozens of times. The routine was familiar, almost comfortable. One last thing, I added. Captain says intel has been unusually quiet. Could be nothing, could be something. Either way, I want everyone on high alert. No complacency today. We spent the next hour checking and double-checking our gear. Weapons cleaned and function checked. Ammunition distributed. First aid kits inspected. Radios tested. Water and rations packed out, everything by the book. Everything as we've done countless times before. At 0730, we mounted our vehicles to Humvees, and an MRA, P&, moved toward the gate of FOB Airborne. As we waited for clearance to depart, I caught Murphy crossing himself, something I'd never seen him do before. You religious now? I asked. He gave a small, embarrassed smile. Sarah's Catholic. Figure it can't hurt. I nodded, respecting the ritual. The gate opened. We moved out. None of us knew that some of us wouldn't be coming back through that gate, at least not the way we left. The first hour of our patrol was uneventful. We moved along Route Irish, maintaining dispersal between vehicles, watching for disturbed earth or suspicious objects that might indicate IED. The morning sun climbed higher, burning away the coolness, making the inside of our Humvee feel like an oven despite the air conditioning. How's visibility, Wilson? I asked our gunner, who stood exposed in the turret, manning the .50 cal. Clear so far, Sarge, he replied, voice slightly muffled by his dust mask. Usual morning traffic. Few farmers. Some kids. I nodded, eyes scanning the road ahead. Chen was driving, his movements precise and deliberate as he navigated around. Potholes that could hide pressure plates. Comes check, Murphy said beside me, then spoke into his radio. Warrior Base, this is Warrior 3. Radio check, over. Warrior 3, this is Base. Lima Charlie, over. The response came immediately. Lima Charlie loud and clear. Our first indication that something was off came as we approached a small cluster of mud brick compounds about 5 kilometers from our FOB. Normally, these compounds would be bustling with morning activity: women hanging laundry, men tending livestock, children playing in the dirt yards. Today, most seemed deserted. Where is everyone? Chen asked, slowing slightly as we passed. Friday prayers, Wilson suggested from the turret. Rodriguez, in the trailing vehicle, came over the radio. Warrior 3-1, this is 3-2. Are you seeing this? These places look empty. Affirmative, 3-2, I responded. Stay alert. It wasn't Friday, and even if it were, morning prayers wouldn't have emptied every compound. Something had caused these families to leave, or hide. We continued another 3 kilometers before reaching the first of several checkpoints where Afghan National Police maintained a presence. Usually, these checkpoints were manned by 4 or 2. 6 officers. Today, I counted only 2, and they seemed tense. Hands resting on their weapons. I signaled for Chen to slow as we approached. Salam alaikum. I called to the senior officer, a sergeant I'd met several times before, named Faz. Alaikum salam, Staff Sergeant, he replied, his English heavily accented but understandable. He didn't smile as he usually did. Quiet morning? I commented, gesturing to the empty road ahead. Faisal nodded, glancing nervously down the road. People stay home today. Why's that? He shrugged, a gesture that could mean anything or nothing in Afghanistan. Talk in village. Bad men coming. Taliban. Another. Shrugged. Maybe other. I hear only talk. From who? When last night, old man from hills come down. Say fighters moving. Many fighters. I exchanged looks with Murphy, who was already making notes of the conversation. Any specific area we should watch? I asked. Faisal pointed east, toward the mountains that bordered Pakistan. Always they come from there. I thanked him and signaled Chen to continue. As we pulled away, I radioed the information back to base. Warrior Base, this is Warrior 3. Be advised, ANP, at Checkpoint 1, reporting rumors of insurgent movement. Locals apparently staying indoors, requesting any aerial reconnaissance and RAO. Over. Copy that, Warrior 3. UAV assets, currently tasked elsewhere, will advise if that changes. Continue mission with caution. Over. Roger Base, 3 out. Murphy frowned. No eyes in the sky today. Sounds like it. I wasn't happy about it either. Unmanned aerial vehicles provided valuable overwatch, especially in terrain like Warduck where fighters could hide in countless folds and ravines. As we approached Saidabad, the larger village that was our primary objective, the absence of normal activity became more pronounced. The road leading to the village market, usually congested with carts, motorcycles, and pedestrians, was nearly empty. A few old men sat outside a tea shop, watching us pass with expressionless faces. I don't like this, Rodriguez said over the radio. Me neither, I replied. 3-2, hold at the village entrance. We'll proceed on foot from here. I want your team providing overwatch from that rise to the west. Copy that. We dismounted, leaving Chen and Thomas with the vehicles, while the rest of us prepared to move through the village on foot. I split us into two. Fire team's mine would take the main road through the market, while Rodriguez would circle around to the western edge, where he could observe both us and the eastern approaches to the village. Keep your spacing, I reminded. Everyone. Murphy, stay on that radio. Wilson, watch the rooftops. As we started forward, I noticed more details that raised my internal alarm. Shops that should have been open were shuttered. Doors that usually stood open were closed. Even the village dogs, normally plentiful and aggressive, were nowhere to be seen. It wasn't just quiet, it was empty. As if the village knew something we didn't. As if everyone had fled before we arrived. Or as if they were hiding, waiting for something to happen. Sarge, Murphy whispered beside me. Something's very wrong here. I nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility for my men press down on me. Every instinct told me to abort the patrol, to return to base and request aerial reconnaissance before proceeding, but we had our orders. And sometimes in Afghanistan, the absence of the enemy was the clearest sign of their presence. Stay frosty, I told my team. We're continuing to the market. Rodriguez, you see anything from your position? Negative, Sarge. Just more nothing. It's like a ghost town. We moved forward, each step taking us deeper into the quiet. The market of Saidabad should have been the busiest place in the district. On previous patrols, we'd had to weave through crowds of shoppers. Vendors calling out prices, children begging for candy or pens. The air would be thick with the smells of spices, cooking meat, and unwashed bodies. Today, it was a skeleton. A few stalls stood open, their wares half-heartedly displayed. The fruit vendor who always greeted us with a wave was gone, his wooden stand empty. The chai shop where local elders gathered to discuss politics and gossip had its shutters down. This is wrong, Ortiz muttered, his rifle at the ready, as we moved past a row of closed storefronts. Where the hell is everybody? I had no answer. 6 months in this province had taught me that empty spaces often meant danger. We continued to the center of the market, where a well served as both water source and gathering place. Normally, women would be there filling containers, children playing nearby. Today, only one elderly man sat on the stone edge, watching our approach with rheumy eyes. I nodded to him as we passed. Saloom, alaikum. He returned the nod but said nothing, his gaze following us as we moved beyond him. Murphy leaned closer to me. That old man give you the creeps too. He's just old, Murphy. Nah, Sarge. He was watching us like he knows something. I couldn't disagree. The old man's stare had held something pity, perhaps our resignation. We reached our first objective, a 3-story building overlooking the eastern valley where intelligence had reported nighttime movement. Wilson took up position on the roof, with his rifle, while the rest of us secured the ground floor. "Rooftop clear," Wilson reported. "I've got eyes on Rodriguez's team and the eastern approach." "See any movement out there?" I asked. "Negative. No people, no vehicles." "Wait," he paused. "There are some goats on the hillside, but no shepherd. That's weird, right? It was livestock was valuable. No one would leave their animals unattended." "Murphy, radio Rodriguez. Ask if he sees those goats or anyone who might be watching them." Murphy relayed the message, then looked up with a frown. "Rodriguez says the goats have been there since they arrived. No sign of a shepherd or anyone else." I didn't like it. None of it felt right. I decided to try speaking with one of the few merchants still in the market, a middle-aged man selling cigarettes and sundries from a small stall. "Stay here," I told Murphy and Ortiz. "I'm going to talk to that shopkeeper." The man tensed as I approached, his eyes darting around as if looking for escape routes. "Salam," I greeted him in Pashto, one of the few words I knew, then switched to English. "Why is the market empty today? Where is everyone?" He shook his head, not meeting my eyes. No English. I'd heard him speak English to soldiers before. He was lying. "Taliban?" I asked, making the word a question. His eyes widened slightly. "Fear." He glanced quickly eastward, toward the mountains, then back at me. "No market today," he said finally. "Go home. You go home too." He made a shooing motion with his hands. I returned to my men. "Something's got these people spooked." "No shit," Ortiz said. "Did he say what?" "No, but he reacted when I mentioned Taliban." I looked around the empty market again, weighing our options. We still had 2 more observation points to check, but my instincts were screaming that we should withdraw. "Murphy, radio base. Tell them the village is abnormally deserted. Locals appear frightened. Possible Taliban presence expected. Request permission to alter mission parameters." Murphy spoke into his radio, waited for a response, then looked at me with a grimace. "Base says to continue mission. Captain wants eyes on those observation points. They're sending 2nd platoon. To reinforce ETA 90 minutes? 90 minutes? A lot could happen in 90 minutes. Roger that. Tell Rodriguez we're moving to observation point Bravo. His team should maintain overwatch from their current position." We moved carefully through the remainder of the market, every sense heightened. The few locals still present seemed to shrink away as we passed, some making the subtle hand gesture Afghans use to ward off evil. Observation Point Bravo was an abandoned house on the northeastern edge of the village. Its 2nd floor provided a clear view of a narrow pass where 3rd platoon had reported nighttime movement. As we approached the building, Wilson stopped suddenly, raising his fist, the signal to halt. "What is it?" I whispered. He pointed to the ground. Recent footprints led to and from the house, multiple sets, made by men wearing military-style boots, not villagers, who typically wore sandals or soft leather shoes. I signaled the team to take up defensive positions while I examined the tracks more closely. They were fresh, maybe hours old, at least for different people, moving with purpose. "Murphy, tell Rodriguez we may have company at Bravo." Recent boot tracks. While Murphy relayed the message, I studied the house. Its windows were intact but dark. The door appeared closed but not barricaded. Nothing obvious indicated current occupation, but those footprints told a different story. "Wilson, cover the door. Ortiz, go around back. Check for additional entry points or signs of occupation." Ortiz nodded and moved silently around the corner. Wilson took a position with his rifle trained on the front entrance, while Murphy and I waited, tense and watchful. "Rodriguez is moving to higher ground for better overwatch," Murphy whispered. "Says he still doesn't see any movement in the area." Ortiz returned moments later, back doors partially open. More footprints leading in and out. "Looks like they left recently." I made my decision. We cleared the building, room by room. Standard procedure. "Wilson, you're on point. Ortiz, rear security. Murphy stays with me." Wilson nodded, his face set with determination as he approached the door. He tested it gently and locked. With practiced movements, He pushed it open with his rifle barrel and entered in a crouch, sweeping his weapon across the front room. "Clear," he whispered. We followed, moving through the house methodically. Ground floor clear. Stairs creaked beneath our boots. As we ascended to the second level, 2 rooms both empty, but with signs of recent occupation. Cigarette butts, a discarded food wrapper with Arabic writing, an empty ammunition box. "Taliban?" Murphy asked, pointing to the box. I examined it without touching. "Or foreign fighters. Not local, anyway." The final room was what we were looking for, a corner space with windows facing both east toward the mountain pass and north toward the road leading from Pakistan. Perfect observation post with clear fields of fire in multiple directions, and on the floor, a disturbing discovery. Calculations scribbled in chalk, distance markers, wind corrections. "Sniper hide," Wilson said, recognizing it immediately. I nodded grimly. Someone had been using this room to plan shots, likely targeting the road we'd just traveled. "Murphy, call this in. Possible sniper position. Recently occupied." As Murphy made the call, I moved to the window overlooking the eastern valley. Through my binoculars, I could see the goats Wilson had mentioned, still grazing unattended on the hillside. Beyond them, the mountain pass appeared. Empty, no vehicles, no fighters, no movement at all. That's when I noticed it, or rather, noticed the absence of it. "Anyone here, any birds?" I asked suddenly. The others paused, listening. "Now that you mention it, ... double quotes, Ortiz began. "The whole valley's silent," Wilson finished. He was right. No bird song, no distant goat bells, no farmers calling to one another across fields. Even the ever-present sound of wind seemed to have died away. Murphy lowered his radio. "Base acknowledges. They want us to proceed to the final observation point. Then, RTB. Return to base." For once, an order I was happy to follow. "Let's move," I said. Same formation, extra vigilance. As we exited the building, the silence seemed to press against us, a physical presence. The few villagers who had been visible when we entered the market were now gone. Even the old man at the well had vanished. Saidabad had become a ghost town, and we were the ghosts, moving through empty streets that should have been full of life. "Sarge," Murphy whispered, his voice tight, "I don't like this. It feels like we're being watched." I finished for him. He nodded, eyes scanning rooftops and windows. The silence stretched on, unnatural and heavy. I'd experienced ambushes before, felt the tension before an attack, but this was different. It wasn't the presence of danger that unsettled me. It was the absence of everything else. "Warrior 3, this is Warrior Base. Radio check, over." Murphy responded immediately. "Base, this is 3. Lima Charlie, over. 3, be advised. Second platoon is en route to your position. ETA now 70 minutes. Report status, over to Base 3. Village appears evacuated. Located possible enemy sniper position at observation point Bravo. Moving to Charlie now. Situation tense, over." Listened to the exchange while keeping my eyes on our surroundings. The radio hour lifeline to support, to air assets, to medical. Evacuation, if things went bad, suddenly seemed fragile. 3, base. Roger that. UAV, still unavailable. Maintain regular comms checks, out. Rodriguez's voice cut in on our squad frequency. 3-1, this is 3-2. Movement spotted on Eastern Ridge. Single individual, appears to be using binoculars. Roger, 3-2. Can you identify? Negative, too far for visual ID. Wait, he's gone now. I swallowed hard. Someone was watching. Us, assessing. Planning. Murphy looked at me. Orders, Sarge. Part of me wanted to abort, to get my men back to our vehicles and return to base. But leaving now meant mission failure and potentially missing critical intelligence about enemy movements. We continued to Charlie. Tell Rodriguez to maintain overwatch and report any further movement. As we moved toward our final observation point, Murphy maintained a running dialogue with Base and Rodriguez's team. The routine radio checks provided some comfort each response, confirming we weren't alone, that help could come if needed. 3-1, 3-2. More movement on the ridge. Multiple individuals now. Can you get a count? I'm seeing at least 3. No. 4 figures moving south along the ridge line. They're keeping to cover. I relayed this to base, who acknowledged but had no new guidance. That's when the radio traffic from other units started picking up. Base, this is Warrior 1. Local sources reporting insurgent activity near our patrol route. Requesting clarification. Over. Warrior 4 to base. Village elder warning us to leave area immediately. Claims large attack imminent. Please advise. The tempo of communications increased. Different platoons, different areas, all reporting the same thing. Locals evacuating, warnings of danger, unusual quiet. Then, the first report of contact. Contact. Warrior 2 taking fire from multiple positions. Grid coordinate Sierra-Golf, -7-4-6-8. That location was less than 5 kilometers from our position. Murphy, tell Rodriguez we're scrubbing Charlie. We're returning to the vehicles now. Murphy nodded, relief evident on his face as he relayed the order. Then his expression changed. Sarge, I can't raise Rodriguez. Try again. He did, repeating the call sign with increasing urgency. 3-2, this is 3-1. Radio check, over 3-2, respond. Nothing but static. Could be terrain interference, Ortiz suggested without conviction. We all knew better. In the 6 months we'd been running patrols, Rodriguez had never missed a radio check. Change of plans, I said, forcing calm into my voice. We moved to Rodriguez's last position. Standard patrol formation, maximum dispersion. As we turned toward the western edge of the village where Rodriguez's team had been providing overwatch, Murphy tried one more time. 3-2, this is 3-1. If you can hear me, pop smoke. We waited, scanning the ridge where they should have been. No smoke. No response. No movement. Just silence. We approached the ridge where Rodriguez's team had established their position, moving in a tactical formation, Wilson on point, Ortiz covering our rear, Murphy beside me constantly trying the radio. Still nothing from Rodriguez, he whispered. I nodded, my mind racing through possibilities. None good. As we crested a small rise, we spotted their position, a cluster of large rocks, providing natural cover with good lines of sight toward both the village and the eastern valleys. No movement. No sign of Rodriguez or his 3 men. Spread out, I ordered quietly. Approach from multiple angles. We advanced cautiously. The silence seemed to deepen with each step. No birds singing. No distant village sounds. No wind, as if the world were holding its breath. That's when I saw the first sign something was wrong. Rodriguez's radio, lying in the dirt outside their position. No soldier would abandon their communications equipment. Contact imminent, I hissed to my men. Weapons. Ready? We moved to the rocks, each of us covering a different sector. As I rounded the largest boulder, I saw them, Rodriguez and his team. All 4 men lying motionless, facing outward in defensive positions. For one terrible moment, I thought they were dead. Then I saw Rodriguez's finger move slightly, signaling, me too, get down. I dropped to a crouch, signaling my men to do the same. Using hand signals, I asked Rodriguez what was happening. His response was minimal but clear. Enemy, many. Surrounding, he pointed slowly toward the eastern ridge where they'd reported movement earlier. I raised my binoculars carefully, scanning the area. Nothing at first. Then movement, a flash of fabric, the barrel of a weapon. More movement to the south. We were being surrounded. I signaled to Murphy, radio. He shook his head, pointing to his equipment. Dead jammed, Rodriguez confirmed. With a grim nod, their comms had gone silent minutes after their last transmission. Electronic warfare, someone was jamming our frequencies. I did a quick assessment. 8 men, standard patrol weapons, limited ammunition. Unknown number of hostiles with unknown capabilities actively encircling our position without radio. We couldn't call for support, couldn't coordinate with base, couldn't request extraction. We were on our own. I made the only decision possible. We needed to break contact, return to our vehicles, and get back to base to report what was happening. Using hand signals, I communicated the plan. Move together. South route, maximum stealth. If compromised, aggressive assault through enemy line at its weakest point. Everyone nodded understanding. No one showed fear, though I knew they all felt it. These were good men, as we prepared to move. I noticed something that turned my blood cold. The goats on the hillside, the ones that had been grazing unattended, were gone. Not just moved. Gone. And that's when everything went quiet. Not the absence of noise we'd been experiencing, but something deeper. A silence so profound it seemed to press against my eardrums. The ambient sounds of the world, the subtle whisper of air moving, the distant hum of life, the barely perceptible rustle of fabric as men breathed, all vanished. 17 seconds. I counted them, each one stretching like an eternity. No one moved. No one spoke. We barely breathed. The world paused. Rodriguez's eyes met mine. In them, I saw the same realization I'd come to. This wasn't a patrol being ambushed. This was bait being taken, as if confirming my thought. The silence broke with a sound like thunder. The first RPG hit 30 meters to our right, the explosion sending dirt and rock fragments raining down on us. Before the debris settled, automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions. The eastern ridge, the southern hills, even from within the village we just left. Contact all sides, I shouted, my voice nearly lost in the cacophony of gunfire. Return fire, conserve ammo. We shifted to a tight defensive circle, each man covering a sector. Rodriguez and his team had already established good firing positions among the rocks. My team quickly integrated with theirs, creating interlocking fields of fire. Wilson, our best marksman, spotted a muzzle flash on the ridge and fired 3 precise shots. A figure tumbled down the slope. I count at least 15 positions, Rodriguez shouted over the din. Maybe 30 fighters. The math was simple and brutal. 8 of us, at least 30 of them. No radio, limited ammunition, no air support. We need to move, I called to Rodriguez. Can't stay pinned here. He nodded grimly. South is least concentrated. If we punch through there, we might make it to the vehicles. Another RPG impacted, closer this time, showering us with debris. Ortiz cried out as a fragment sliced across his arm. I'm good, he insisted, though blood soaked his sleeve. Just a cut. Davis, our medic, quickly applied a pressure bandage, while continuing to fire his weapon one-handed. On my mark, I shouted. We move south in bounds. First team provides cover. Second team advances 50 meters, then switch. Rodriguez, your team first. He nodded, gathering his men with hand signals. Covering fire, I ordered, and my team unleashed a barrage toward the most active enemy positions. Rodriguez and his 3 men sprinted south, taking advantage of the terrain for cover. They reached a dry stream about 40 meters away and established new firing positions. Now us, I called. Murphy, Wilson, Ortiz. They made the run as Rodriguez's team provided suppressive fire. I followed a moment later, making it to the stream as bullets kicked up dirt around my feet. They're shifting to cut us off, Rodriguez warned, pointing to movement along the ridgeline. He was right. The Taliban fighters were maneuvering to maintain their encirclement, anticipating our attempt to reach the vehicles. New plan, I said. We don't go straight back. We head southwest, then circle around to the road. It would be longer, but might break their containment. We continued our leapfrog movement, each bound taking us closer to potential escape, each moment exposing someone to enemy fire. We'd covered about 200 meters when Chen went down. Man hit. Wilson called. Davis rushed to Chen's side. The bullet had caught him in the thigh, missing the artery, but shattering bone. Can't walk, Davis reported. Need to carry him. Make a stretcher, I ordered. Use rifle slings. While Davis and Thomas quickly improvised a carrying system, the rest of us provided covering fire. The enemy was pressing closer, growing bolder as they sensed our vulnerability. Running low on ammo, Rodriguez warned. Maybe 50 rounds left. I checked my own magazines. Similar situation. We secured Chen to the makeshift stretcher. His face was pale, but determined. "Leave me," he gasped. "I'll cover you." "Not happening," I told him. "No one gets left." Miller and Thomas took the first carrying shift. We resumed our movement, now significantly slowed by the need to transport Chen. The enemy fire intensified. They knew we were compromised, knew our options were limited. Another RPG impacted nearby, closer than before. They were finding our range. That's when Murphy spotted Ida Ravine cutting southwest through the terrain, deep enough to provide cover, heading in roughly the direction we needed. "Sarge, there," he pointed. "Make for the ravine," I ordered. "Go, go, go." We abandoned our careful bounds for a desperate dash, bullets snapping past us as we ran. Miller stumbled, but kept his grip on Chun's stretcher. Ortiz took a round through his pack but stayed on his feet. The ravine was 20 meters away, then 10. Then we were sliding down its steep sides into relative safety, dragging Chun's stretcher between us. For a moment, we lay there, gasping for breath as enemy fire continued to pass overhead. "Everyone here?" I asked, doing a quick head count. 8 faces looked back at me. Bloody, dirt-streaked, terrified but alive. For now, the ravine provided temporary shelter, but we couldn't stay. Taliban fighters would be moving to flank us, to catch us in this natural trap. "Ammo count," I ordered, checking my own resources. 2 full magazines, plus half in the weapon. About 70 rounds total. Similar reports came from the others. Rodriguez had less 50 rounds. Wilson, our marksman, had conserved Beretta 5. Davis had a single magazine left. No one had grenades. We'd used our last 2 providing cover during our retreat. "Radio?" I asked Murphy. He shook his head, still jammed. They must have sophisticated equipment. I did a quick assessment of our situation. Chen needed medical evacuation. We were low on ammunition. Enemy forces outnumbered us, at least 3 to 1. Our position would soon be compromised. But we still had advantages. We were trained soldiers. We knew the terrain from months of patrols, and they might not know exactly where we were. "Here's the plan," I said, gathering everyone close. We followed this ravine southwest for about 800 meters. It should lead toward the road where our vehicles are parked. If they're still there, we mount up and punch through back to base. And if the vehicles are gone, Rodriguez asked, then we continue west on foot, call for extraction once we're beyond their jamming range. No one mentioned the obvious that beyond their jamming range might be kilometers away, through enemy-controlled territory. "Chen, how are you holding up?" I asked. His face was pale, lips pressed tight against pain. "I'll make it, Sarge." "Davis, give him morphine if you have it." Davis nodded, administering a syringe from his medical pack. "We move in fire teams," I continued. "Rodriguez, your team takes point. Mine will handle rear security and Chen. Conserve ammunition, shoot only when you have a clear target." We started moving along the ravine, staying low, using its winding path for concealment. The sound of gunfire receded slightly. They'd lost our exact position, but were still searching. We'd covered maybe 300 meters, when Rodriguez raised his fist, the signal to halt. Up ahead, the ravine widened into a small clearing before continuing. Crossing would expose us. "Cover positions," Rodriguez whispered. "I see movement on the ridge to our right." We pressed ourselves against the ravine walls. Wilson set up his rifle on a small rock outcropping, scanning the ridge through his scope. "2 fighters," he reported softly, "moving parallel to us. Don't think they've spotted us yet." I weighed our options. We could wait and hope they moved on. We could try to find another route, or we could eliminate the threat. "Wilson," I said, "can you take them both?" He studied the targets through his scope, calculating distance, wind, elevation. "Affirmative, but it'll alert others to our position. Take the shot when ready. Everyone else prepare to move immediately after." Wilson steadied his breathing, finger curling around the trigger. 2 shots cracked in rapid succession. the sound amplified in the ravine. "Targets down," he reported without emotion. "Move now," I ordered. "Cross the clearing in pairs. Davis and Thomas, you have Chen." We dashed across the exposed area, expecting gunfire to erupt at any moment. Miraculously, we made it to the continuation of the ravine without incident. "They'll be coming now," Rodriguez warned. Those shots carried. He was right. Within minutes, we heard shouts and the sound of running feet above us. They were converging on our position. "Defensive positions," I ordered. "Prepare for contact." We arrayed ourselves along a bend in the ravine, creating a bottleneck that would force attackers to come at us head-on. The first Taliban fighter appeared around the bend, weapon raised. Wilson dropped him with a single shot. 2 more followed, firing wildly. We returned fire, more precise, more disciplined. For 5 intense minutes, we held our position against repeated attempts to overwhelm us. 4, then 6, then 8 enemy fighters went down, but they kept coming. "Running low," Rodriguez warned, switching to his last magazine. I was down to 30 rounds, Wilson to his last 20, others similarly depleted. "We can't stay," I decided. On my signal, we fall back while to provide covering fire, then leapfrog. Rodriguez nodded. "Miller and I will cover first. Execute." The rest of us moved back along the ravine while Rodriguez and Miller laid down suppressive fire. When we'd gained 50 meters, I called, "Set, covering." They sprinted past us as we took up the fighting. We continued this way, moving and fighting, gradually making progress toward where we hoped our vehicles waited. Each meter gained cost, precious ammunition. Each minute increased Chen's risk. But we were moving. We were fighting back. And somehow, against the odds, we were still alive. We'd been fighting our way through the ravine for 20 minutes when Murphy took the hit. One moment he was beside me, returning fire at the pursuing Taliban. The next, he was on his back, a dark stain spreading across his chest. "Man down," I shouted, dragging him behind a rock, outcropping as bullets peppered the ground around us. Davis was there instantly, cutting away Murphy's body armor to assess the wound. His expression told me everything. "How bad?" Murphy asked, his voice surprisingly calm. Davis hesitated. "Through and through. Upper right chest. Possible lung involvement." What he didn't say, without immediate evacuation, Murphy's chances were slim. "Can't catch a break today? Huh, Sarge?" Murphy tried to smile, blood bubbling at the corner of his mouth. "Tell Sarah, you'll tell her yourself," I interrupted. "We're getting out of here." He gripped my arm with surprising strength. "My notebook, inside pocket. Take it." I found the small sweat-stained notebook where he kept his letters to Sarah, tucked it into my own pocket. "Sarge," Rodriguez called. "Urgently. They're flanking right. We need to move." "Murphy can't," Davis said quietly. The unspoken question hung in the air. How do we carry 2 wounded men with ammunition nearly depleted and enemies closing in? Murphy answered it for us. "Leave me a weapon. I'll buy you time." "No one gets left behind," I repeated, more to convince myself than him. "James." He used my first name, something he'd never done. "You know the math? 8 men, 2 wounded, low ammo. Get them out." Before I could argue, gunfire erupted from our right flank. They were closing the noose, covering fire. Rodriguez shouted, his team, engaging the new threat. In that moment of chaos and gunfire, Murphy made the decision for us. He grabbed his rifle, checked his last magazine, and began dragging himself toward a position overlooking the ravine entrance. "Murphy," I called. He looked back once. "Get them home, Sarge. That's your job now." I wanted to stop him, to drag him with us, to refuse his sacrifice. But he was right. My responsibility was to the living, to those who still had a chance. 30 seconds, I told him, my voice breaking. "Give us 30 seconds, then fall back to us." We both knew he wouldn't be falling back. He nodded and continued to his chosen position. "Everyone move," I ordered the others. "Now, Rodriguez, take point." As we retreated further down the ravine, Murphy opened fire from his position, precise bursts that would make the enemy think they faced more than a single wounded soldier. His covering fire allowed us to move. Chen, another 200 meters before we heard the change in the fighting behind us, a crescendo of gunfire. Then, silence. No one spoke. No one needed to. We all understood what had happened. "Keep moving," I said, the words like ash in my mouth. The ravine began to shallow, its walls growing lower. Soon we'd lose even this meager cover. "I see the road," Wilson reported from slightly ahead, about 400 meters. "Vehicles still. There, a small spark of hope. If we could reach those vehicles, we might survive this." Then Thomas took a round through the throat and fell without a sound. Davis was at his side instantly, but there was nothing to be done. The bullet had severed his carotid artery. He was gone before he hit the ground. 2 men lost in less than 10 minutes. My men, my responsibility. I felt something breaking inside me, not fear, not grief, but something colder and harder, something that would let me do what needed to be done. "Leave him," I ordered, retrieving Thomas's remaining ammunition and weapon. "We keep moving." Rodriguez looked at me, saw whatever had changed in my eyes, and nodded grimly. We continued toward the road, toward the vehicles, toward hope behind us. We left 2 good men in the dust of Wardak province. Their sacrifice would not be in vain. I would get the rest out or die trying. The road lay before us, a dusty strip of packed earth, separating life from death. 300 meters of open ground stood between our position at the ravine's end and our vehicles. 300 meters, under enemy fire. "They'll be watching the vehicles," Rodriguez said, scanning the area through his rifle scope. "Probably rigged them too," Wilson added. I would have. I studied the terrain, looking for options. To our left, a shallow depression offered minimal cover for about half the distance. Beyond that, nothing but open ground. We need a diversion, I decided, something to draw their attention away from the vehicles. Miller, who'd been quiet since Thomas fell, spoke up. "The village fuel depot. East side, it's close enough to hit from here." He was right. The small collection of fuel drums that supplied the village generators was visible about 500 meters away, on the far side from our vehicles. "Wilson, can you hit it?" He studied the distance, mentally calculating. "With Thomas's rifle, yes, it's got better range than mine, but it'll take most of my remaining ammo to be sure of ignition." "Do it." While Wilson set up, I outlined our plan. Once the fuel explodes, we move in 2 groups. Rodriguez, you take Miller and Ortiz straight to the lead Humvee. Davis and I will carry Chen to the MRAP. If either vehicle is disabled, we all pile into the operational one. I turned to Chen, whose face was gray with pain despite the morphine. "We're going to move fast. It's going to hurt." He nodded weakly. "Just get us out of here, Sarge. Wilson, you provide covering fire until we reach the vehicles, then run for whichever one starts first." Everyone nodded, tension evident in their tight expressions. Questions? No one spoke. Then prepared to move on Wilson's shot. Wilson lined up carefully, controlling his breathing. The first shot rang out, followed quickly by 3 more. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a small flame appeared among the fuel drums, quickly growing. The explosion came seconds later, fireball rising into the sky, followed by secondary explosions as additional drums ignited. "Now," I shouted. We burst from cover, running in a low crouch toward the vehicles. Davis and I half carried, half dragged Chen between us. The first shots from Taliban positions came almost immediately, wild at first, then increasingly accurate. As they spotted us, Rodriguez's team reached the lead Humvee first. Miller slid beneath it, checking for IEDs. "Clear," he called, climbing into the driver's seat. Rodriguez and Ortiz provided covering fire as Davis and I struggled toward the MRAP, with Chen bullets kicked up dust around us. One pinged off my helmet, the impact sending stars across my vision. "Almost there," I gasped to Chen, whose face was contorted in agony. 20 meters from the MRAP, Davis stumbled. I turned in time to see him pitch forward, a dark hole between his shoulder blades. He didn't move again. There was no time to mourn, no time to retrieve his body. With a strength born of desperation, I hoisted Chen over my shoulder in a fireman's carry and ran the final distance. "Get in," Rodriguez shouted from the Humvee's turret position. Miller's got it started. I placed Chen in the MRAP's back seat, quickly checking it for explosives. Finding none, I leaped into the driver's seat and hit the ignition. Nothing. I tried again. The engine turned over, but wouldn't catch. "Dead," I called to Rodriguez. "We're coming to you." I pulled Chen from the MRAP and began dragging him toward the Humvee. Wilson, having expended his ammunition, sprinted from his covering position to help me. Together, we loaded Chen into the back of the Humvee as bullets peppered the vehicle. "Go, go, go," I shouted to Miller. He gunned the engine. The Humvee lurched forward, accelerating down the road back toward our base. Rodriguez continued firing from the turret position, keeping the Taliban fighters' heads down as we sped away. I looked back at the receding battlefield, at the ravine where Murphy had made his stand, at the MRAP where Davis lay dead, at the village we'd entered hours earlier, now partially burning from the fuel depot explosion. 6 men had entered that village under my command. 3 of us were leaving. We reached FOB airborne with a nearly empty fuel tank and over 50 bullet holes in our Humvee. The gate guards recognized our vehicle and situation immediately, calling out a quick reaction force and medical team as we approached. The next hours passed in a blur. Chen was rushed to surgery. The rest of us were checked for wounds, then separated. For debriefing, I remember sitting in a small room, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold in my hands, recounting the events to Captain Reynolds and a grim-faced intelligence officer. "You're saying they knew you were coming," Reynolds stated. "Not a question." "Yes, sir. The entire village was evacuated. They were waiting for us. And you believe they had electronic warfare capabilities, sophisticated enough to jam our encrypted frequencies?" "Yes, sir." All comms went down simultaneously. That's not coincidence. The intelligence officer made notes, his expression revealing nothing. "We're mounting a recovery operation for Murphy, Thomas, and Davis," Reynolds said. "Air support and 2 platoons. We'll bring them home." I nodded, throat tight. "Thank you, sir." After the debriefing, I found myself at the base chapel, not from religious conviction, but because it was quiet and empty. I sat in the last row, Murphy's notebook heavy in my pocket. Rodriguez found me there an hour later. "Chen's out of surgery," he said, sitting beside me. "Doc says he'll keep the leg. He's being evacuated to Germany tomorrow." "Good," I managed. "That's good." We sat in silence for a long moment. "Not your fault," Rodriguez said finally. "You know that, right?" I didn't answer. "Couldn't." We walked into a trap. "Could have happened to any patrol. I was in command," I said. "My responsibility. And you got 3 of us out alive. Chen, Miller, me, we're breathing because of you." His words should have provided comfort. They didn't. "Murphy asked me to give something to Sarah," I said, touching the notebook in my pocket. "How do I do that? How do I face her?" Rodriguez had no answer. Later that night, I sat alone in my quarters, finally opening Murphy's notebook. Inside were letters, dozens of them written to Sarah. Some recounted daily life on base. Others spoke of plans for their future together. The last entry, dated that morning, contained only a few lines. "If you're reading this, I didn't make it back. Don't be angry. Don't be bitter. I knew the risks. I accepted them. The guys I served with were worth it. Loved the life I couldn't. That's all I ask." I closed the notebook, tears finally coming after hours of numb shock. The recovery operation launched at dawn. I wasn't permitted to join standard protocol after losing men in combat. Instead, I stood at the base perimeter, watching helicopters circle the area where we'd been ambushed. They returned 6 hours later. 3 flag-draped cases were unloaded with solemn ceremony. Captain Reynolds found me that evening. "We recovered all 3, he confirmed. "And we found evidence of at least 12 enemy gear from your squad's action." I nodded, processing this information. 12 enemy fighters. Against 8 of us. Against Murphy's last stand. Intelligence is still analyzing, but early indications suggest this was planned well in advance. Reynolds continued. Not just local. Taliban. Possibly foreign fighters with advanced training and equipment. Sir, I asked, did we have a leak? How did they know our patrol route? He hesitated. We're investigating that possibility. There are concerns about some of our Afghan partners. The implication was clear. Someone inside the wire had betrayed us. I'm recommending you and your surviving men for valor awards, he added. Your actions saved 3 lives and prevented what could have been an even larger ambush against our QRF awards, as if medals could balance the weight of the lives lost. Thank you, sir, I said mechanically. That night I lay awake, replaying every moment of the patrol, the silence before the attack, Murphy's sacrifice, Thomas falling without a sound, Davis cut down just steps from extraction. I remembered the old Afghan man at the well, watching us with knowing eyes, the empty market, the abandoned goats. All warning signs I'd recognized, but pushed forward through anyway. In the darkness of my quarters, I made 2 promises to myself. First, I would deliver Murphy's notebook to Sarah, personally, when I returned home. Second, I would never again ignore the sound of silence. 3 weeks after the ambush, I stood at attention in my dress uniform, staring straight ahead as the brigade commander pinned the Bronze Star with V device for valor to my chest. Rodriguez and Miller received the same honor. Chen, still recovering in Germany, would receive his medal in a separate ceremony. Murphy, Thomas, and Davis were awarded the Bronze Star posthumously. The ceremony was brief, formal, necessary. The commander spoke of courage under fire, of leadership in adversity, of honoring the fallen through continued service. I heard little of it, my mind back in that ravine, in those 17 seconds of silence before the world exploded. Afterward, there was a small reception. Officers offered congratulations. Fellow soldiers, those who understood what such medals truly cost of her, something closer to condolence in their handshakes and nods. I escaped as soon as protocol allowed, finding a quiet corner of the base to remove the medal and stare at it. The weight of it in my palm seemed insignificant compared to the weight in my chest. Captain Reynolds found me there. Not much for ceremonies, he observed, leaning against the wall beside me. No, sir. The investigation confirmed what you suspected, electronic warfare capabilities beyond what we've typically seen from Taliban forces. Likely foreign-trained operators. I nodded, unsurprised. There's more, he continued. We identified the leak, an interpreter working with headquarters. He disappeared the night before your patrol, so they knew exactly where we'd be. When we'd be there, yes, but there's something else you should know. Reynolds paused. 2nd Platoon found a staging area during the recovery operation. Maps, weapons, communication equipment. Based on what they discovered, your patrol wasn't the main target. I looked up, suddenly alert. The village was wired with IEDSDs of them, in places that would have maximized casualties. They were planning to hit the QRF that would respond to your patrol's distress call. Could have been 30, 40 casualties. But when we fought our way out, instead of calling for help, I began. You disrupted their entire operation. The QRF went in prepared with air support. They found the IEDs before anyone triggered them. The implications settled over me slowly. Our escape bot with Murphy's, Thomas's, and Davis's lives had potentially saved dozens more. I thought you should know that, Reynolds said. Doesn't bring them back, but it means something. After he left, I sat alone for a long time, turning the medal over in my hands. It wasn't comfort, exactly. The loss was still raw, the guilt still present, but it was context. Purpose. Later that week, I wrote 3 letters to Murphy's parents in South Boston, describing their son's courage, his loyalty, his sacrifice that saved his brothers in arms. I told them about Sarah, about the notebook, about my promise to deliver it personally, to Thomas's wife in Georgia, recounting how her husband had never wavered, had fought with skill and determination until the very end, how he'd been respected by every man in the squad, to Davis's mother in California, explaining how her son had joined to become a doctor, had saved Chen's life through immediate treatment, had moved without hesitation to help Murphy even under fire, had given everything to fulfill his duty as a medic. I chose my words carefully, balancing truth with mercy. They deserved to know how their loved ones died. They didn't need every brutal detail. With each letter, I enclosed a copy of my commendation, the official account of that day, and with each I made a silent promise to honor their memory through how I lived after Afghanistan. The medal itself I packed away. Perhaps someday I would see it differently. For now, it was a reminder of the constant, the responsibility I still carried. My deployment ended 3 months after the ambush. I completed my remaining time in Afghanistan behind the wire, training new arrivals, planning patrols I wouldn't lead, passing on hard-earned wisdom about reading terrain, reading people, reading silence. The flight home was 18 hours of enforced reflection. Around me, soldiers celebrated, slept, or stared into middle distance, each processing their own version of the war we were leaving. I spent most of the time drafting and redrafting what I would say to Sarah. We landed at Fort Drum in early December. Snow covered the ground, a startling white after Afghanistan's browns and tans. The air bit cold and clean, carrying none of the smells of burning trash, dust, and diesel that had become normal. My parents met me at the reception center. My mother hugged me too tightly, as if confirming I was whole. My father, seeing something in my eyes, simply gripped my shoulder and nodded. They didn't ask questions. They'd learned after my first deployment that some stories come out slowly, if at all. 2 weeks of mandatory reintegration followed briefings on benefits, mental health screenings, medical evaluations. I answered the counselor's questions truthfully, but minimally. Yes, I experienced combat. Yes, I lost men under my command. No, I wasn't having nightmares or flashbacks. Not yet, anyway. The first true test came at the welcome home ceremony. Families filled the gymnasium, holding signs, children bouncing with excitement. Among them stood other families, those whose soldiers hadn't returned. Murphy's parents, Thomas's wife and daughter, Davis's mother and sister. I'd arranged to meet with each of them privately afterward. Those were the hardest conversations I've ever had. I told them about their sons, their husband, their brother. I answered their questions as honestly as I could. I accepted their tears, their anger, their gratitude. Davis's mother hugged me. This stranger who had survived when her son hadn't. He always wanted to help people, she said, even as a little boy. He saved Chun's life, I told her. He never hesitated, not once. Thomas's wife asked if he had suffered. I couldn't lie to her. It was quick, I said. He didn't feel pain. That much was true. Murphy's parents were last. His father, stoic and weathered, shook my hand with crushing force. His mother clutched a photo of her son in uniform. He talked about you in his letters, she said. Said you were the best squad leader he'd worked with. I swallowed hard. He was one of the finest soldiers I've known. Then I took out the notebook. He wanted Sarah to have this, I explained. I promised to deliver it personally. Mrs. Murphy touched the worn cover gently. She's coming tomorrow, from Boston. We'll make sure she gets it. I shook my head. With respect, ma'am, I need to give it to her myself. I made a promise. They understood. Promises to the dead carry. Special weight. The next day, I met Sarah at a small coffee shop near the base. She was exactly as Murphy had described her, petite, red-haired, with a determined set to her jaw. She wore his dog tags over her sweater. Staff Sergeant Caldwell, she said, offering her hand. No tears, though her eyes were red-rimmed from previous crying. James, please. We sat. I placed the notebook on the table between us. He wrote to you every day, I said. Kept it all in here. She nodded, not touching it yet. Tell me what happened. The real version, not the official one. So, I did. The whole truth, from the silence before the attack to Murphy's final stand. She deserved that much. When I finished, she finally reached for the notebook. He always said if anything happened, I shouldn't be sad. That he was doing exactly what he wanted to do, with people he respected. She looked up at me. Was that true? Yes, I said without hesitation. That was true. As I left her with Murphy's last words, I realized something. Coming home isn't a place or a moment. It's a process, one I was only beginning. I'm 30 now, been out of the Army for 7 years. I teach history at a high school in Boise following in my father's footsteps, after all. My students know I served, but few know the details. That's how I prefer it. I stay in touch with the survivors. Rodriguez is a police officer in El Paso. We call each other on April 17th every year. Share a silent toast to Murphy, Thomas, and Davis Chen finished his engineering degree and designs prosthetics for wounded veterans. Miller works construction in Tennessee, has 3 kids now. We have a group text that goes quiet for months, then suddenly fills with inside jokes only we understand. Sometimes I dream of Afghanistan. Not always nightmares, sometimes just the mountains silhouetted against impossible stars, or the unexpected beauty of wildflowers blooming in high valleys. But when the bad dreams come, they always start the same way, with 17 seconds of absolute silence. I've learned to live with it, to understand it. That silence wasn't just the calm before chaos. It was a warning, a gift my instincts tried to give me. It was my body and mind recognizing danger before my conscious thoughts could process it. Now, I listen for other silences. The silence when a student who's normally talkative suddenly withdraws. The silence that falls between a couple whose relationship is fracturing. The silence of a friend who's carrying a burden they can't articulate. I've become attuned to these gaps, these absences that signal something important happening beneath the surface. Sometimes they precede tragedy, like in Wardeck. More often, there are opportunities, moments to intervene, to offer help, to prevent something worse. 3 years ago, I visited the National Infantry Museum at Fort Benning. They have a global war on terrorism memorial there, with names of the fallen. I found Murphy, Thomas, and Davis among thousands of others, touched each name, remembered each face. A young private noticed me standing there. "Did you serve, sir?" he asked. "Afghanistan," I replied. "10th Mountain. Thank you for your service," he said. The phrase, automatic, well-meaning but hollow. I nodded, used to the ritual. But then he asked something different. "Is there anything I should know? I deploy next month." I thought carefully before answering. "Trust your instincts," I told him. "If something feels wrong, it probably is, and ... I hesitated. Listen to the silence. Sometimes what's not happening tells you more than what is. He looked confused, but nodded seriously. I hope he remembered. Last summer, I hiked into the Sawtooth Mountains with my father. We set up camp beside an alpine lake so clear you could count the stones on the bottom. As evening fell, we sat watching trout rise to feed on insects. "You've been home 8 years now," he said, breaking a comfortable silence between us. "But there are days I can see you're still there." I didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Some parts of me never left." He nodded. "Your uncle was the same after Vietnam, said he lived in 2 worlds. Does it get easier?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. "Not easier," he said, echoing what Lieutenant Hayes had told me before my first firefight. "You just get better at carrying it." That night, I woke suddenly in our tent. For a moment, I was disoriented, unsure if I was in Idaho or Afghanistan. Then I heard it, the absolute stillness of the mountain night. No wind in the trees, no insects chirping, no small animals moving in the underbrush. My body tensed automatically, combat instincts awakening. Then I saw the reason for the silence. A large bull moose had wandered into our campsite, massive and majestic in the moonlight. He paused, scenting the air, before continuing down to the lake to drink. Danger had created the silence and war. Here, it was wonder. I watched the moose until he disappeared back into the forest. Then lay awake, considering the difference. Same silence, different meaning. Context matters. Place matters. I'm still learning to distinguish between the silences in my life, which ones warn of danger, which ones offer peace, which ones simply mark transition from one state to another. Murphy wrote in his final letter to Sarah that she should love the life I couldn't. I'm trying to do the same for him, for Thomas, for Davis. To live fully enough for all of us. Some days I succeed. Some days the silence still feels like those 17 seconds in Waika, held breath before catastrophe. But I'm learning to breathe through it, to let it instruct rather than paralyze. To recognize that after silence, life continues. Different, perhaps. Changed, certainly. But it continues.